Today's 59b. About 2/3 of the way down at the two dots. 59b, two dots, 2/3 of the way down. Okay, just a little bit of chazara. So we saw in the Mishnah basically two main scenarios. One scenario was where he marries a woman after 30 days. And the other scenario was where he marries a woman now, but it should only take effect after 30 days. Now, with regard to the first scenario, he marries a woman after 30 days. We discussed yesterday. They can change her mind.
The woman, Rabbi, of course you can change your mind.
Yeah, I guess the question is not if she could change her mind. The question is if can she do anything about it? Can she withdraw the authority successfully from what she's previously done? That was the debate between Rabbi Yehudah and Rish Lakish. We said the halacha was like Rabbi Yehudah, that she may change her mind. She may withdraw from her commitments. Okay, now we get into a little bit more technical. Mekudeshes l'sheni. So what happens is she got married. She says she gets married to a man after 30 days, and then she accepts Kiddushin from somebody else, a second person, effective immediately. What happens? The Mishnah says she's married to the second person. Amar Rav Mekudeshes l'sheni la'olam. So Rav explains, what does that mean? She's married to the second person. Period. The first person's Kiddushin was after 30 days. Because she's married to somebody else before then, the second Kiddushin never happens. Shmuel says it's a little more complicated than that. Mekudeshes l'sheni ad lamed yom. She's married to the second person until 30 days. La'achar lamed yom paki kiddush sheni v'gamer kiddush rishon. At the end of 30 days, she's no longer married to the second person, and she becomes married to the first person. Second person's Kiddushin's undone, and now she's married to the first person. Why is that? Because the first person married her after 30 days.
So would she need a get, or was it just automatically dissolved?
It seems like she doesn't need, it's dissolved. Would not need a get. Okay. Yosef Rav Chisda v'Kakashalei. Rav Chisda was sitting down, and this strange question that he just asked is Rav Chisda's question. Kiddusha sheni b'mai paki. How exactly can you undo with the second Kiddushin? Why is it that it disappears after 30 days? 1 second. Rav Yosef explains, Mar Aresha Masnila. B'kashalei. Rav Yosef Aseva Masnila v'Lekashalei. So Rav Yosef basically is explaining as follows. The question here is, in this scenario, the first Kiddushin was only supposed to happen after 30 days. Well, now she's married, so it can't happen. So why does the Kiddushin of the second person disappear? How do you remove the valid Kiddushin, the second Kiddushin? However, there's another possibility, which is that this is not going on that scenario. It's going on a different scenario. In other words, the way we're explaining the Machlekes Rav and Shmuel is in a scenario where he says after 30 days. That's where we have this difficulty. But if we change the scenario and say it's mehayom ula'achar lamed, meaning that it happened, that he's saying the Kiddushin should happen now after 30 days, well, then it does make sense why the second Kiddushin should be limited, because the first Kiddushin already happened.
Then the second Kiddushin can't happen.
Well, the first 30 days is available for the second Kiddushin. So it makes sense that it could happen for the first 30 days. And then afterwards, it can't happen because at the time of the second Kiddushin, it was limited by the first Kiddushin. We'll explain. Amar Rav Yosef. If he gives the Kiddushin now, but it should only take effect after 30 days. Rav says she's in a state of suffix Kiddushin forever. In other words, when you have these two people, the second person gives her Kiddushin, and we're not sure who she's married to, the first or the second. Shmuel Amar, ad lamed yom. Shmuel says that state of limbo is only in the first 30 days. The first 30 days, she's sort of doubly married. But after 30 days, then we say she's married to the second person, to the first person, and not to the second person. Okay. And the Gemara explains, the Rav Misapel Itno Havai Ichazor Havai. According to Rav, we're not sure what's going on here. The first Kiddushin has a condition. The condition is it works, it's effective. The Kiddushin is being validated immediately, but to take effect only after 30 days. The second Kiddushin, is that considered a condition, meaning that the second Kiddushin is being valid only for the time period that the first Kiddushin is being valid? In other words, the first 30 days? Or do we say it's Chazar Havai? Or do we say she's withdrawing from the first Kiddushin and she wants the second Kiddushin to work? In other words, the fact that she accepts the second Kiddushin, maybe that means she's changing her mind about the first one. She's invalidating it. So therefore, she should be permanently married to the second person. So Rav says, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know if she means to be married to 30 days to one guy and then forever to the first guy. Or do we say that no, her marriage to the second guy withdraws the first Kiddushin and invalidates it?
Update, where are we?
Sorry?
Update to where we are.
About 8 lines to the bottom of 59b. So the Gemara says, "L'Shmuel pshita le'detno hava." According to Shmuel, it's simple. Uber plucked is the next segment. According to Shmuel, it's obvious that it's a condition, meaning the second condition is a conditional condition. The woman says to the man, it's as if she says to the man, I'm really already married, except that there's a 30-day window where I can get married to somebody else, and I'd like to marry you for that 30-day window.
I guess she's window shopping, Rabbi.
Ooh.
We looked at the Hani Tanoi, and a debate with this debate is similar to another debate. The Tanya we learn, Mehayom ulachar misa. A guy gives his wife a divorce. Mehayom is today, but it should only take effect after I die. This is sort of a technical workaround because a man cannot divorce his wife after he dies. If a man gives his wife a divorce that should only take effect after he dies, it's not a valid divorce. So what's the technical workaround here? He says, I'm giving you the divorce today, but it only takes effect the moment I die. It's a get ve'en a get, it's a suffix get. We don't know what to make of that. That's the opinion of the rabbis. Rabbi says, because I get, it is a valid get. So the Gemara wants to say this presumably is subject to the debate between Rav and Shmuel. Rav says that the Kiddushin is a suffix Kiddushin. We don't know what to make of it. He would say this divorce is a suffix divorce. And Shmuel, it says the Kiddushin is valid. Presumably he says the divorce is valid also. So Gemara says if that's the case, v'neima Rav halacha k'Rabbanan, v'neima Shmuel halacha k'Rebbe. So why does Rav need to expand his decision to a ruling on Kiddushin? Why doesn't he just say the halacha follows the Rabbanon? And Shmuel would say the halacha follows Rebbe. The Gemara says tzricha, it's necessary because gittin and Kiddushin are a little bit different, and you can't directly derive one from another. The ilo amarav halacha Rabbanon havamina hasim d'orchay kasi. I would think that if Rob wasn't sure about a divorce given today after I die, that's specifically as pertains to divorce, which is to distance a wife. But by Kiddushin, where he intends on marrying her, presumably that would imply that she is not rejecting the first Kiddushin. And therefore, he'd agree to Shmuel that after 30 days, she's completely married to the first guy, the guy who gave Kiddushin after 30 days. It's no Havai. If Shmuel said the halacha is like Rebbe says the get is valid, the divorce is valid. in the scenario of Rebbe, we have a problem. We know that a divorce does not work after somebody dies. So therefore, it must mean that when he says "Me'hayom ul'achar misa," it must mean that he means that it should take effect immediately today. You know, it not take effect; it should be effectuated. The divorce should be validated today to take effect when he dies. However, with regard to Kiddushin, a person could make a Kiddushin after 30 days, and therefore maybe he'd agree to Rav that the guy is changing his mind. So therefore, tzricha is necessary it's necessary for them to have this debate with regard to Kiddushin, independent of the debate between the rabbis and Rebbe with regard to a divorce. Are we together?
Mhm.
Literally.
Oh, Rabbi. Abai says, "L'taimid Rav." But okay, so Abai has an interesting observation here. What's Rav's opinion? What happens here? So we have the first guy's Kiddushin is taking effect after 30 days. The second guy's Kiddushin, we don't know, is it a Kiddushin that's limited to 30 days? Or is it Kiddushin, or is it invalidating the previous Kiddushin? So Abai has a scenario like this. Let's say there are three people, okay? Person number one says divorce after 30 days. I'm sorry, a Kiddushin after 30 days. Person number two says Kiddushin after 20 days. And then person number three says Kiddushin after 10 days. Now, so according to Rav, what's the rule? Suffix Kiddushin, which means you need a divorce from everybody. Does Rav say you need a divorce from each one? Or do we say, look, if this statement is an invalidating statement, then only the third person's Kiddushin is valid. The third person's Kiddushin has invalidated the first two. Right? We have Kiddushin after 30, Kiddushin after 20, Kiddushin after 10. Person number three, who did Kiddushin after 10, invalidated person numbers 1 and 2. Or men at number 1 and 2. If we say that it's a Tanai, it's a condition, then person number one's Kiddushin after 30, man number one's Kiddushin after 30, was always the main one. And person numbers 2 and 3, who made Kiddushin after 20 and after 10, are just agreeing to the condition of person number 1. And therefore, only person number 1's Kiddushin is valid after 30 days and nobody else's. You hear the question? What's the third possibility?
None of them are valid.
Well, that would be in the opinion of Shmuel. In according to Shmuel, only the first one would be. But in the opinion of Rav, we have another possibility. Maybe each person, we don't know what they actually meant. In other words, this is a statement that's unclear. Each person can have different intentions. If that's the case, then you would require multiple divorces, right? Because maybe person number 1 who did Kiddushin after 30 days, okay, that's fine. Person number 2 did Kiddushin after 20, was a chazorah. It was a change. He invalidated person number 1's Kiddushin. So in that case, actually, person number 2 requires divorce because he's the valid Kiddushin. But person number 1 was a Tanai, was a condition. Person number 3, I'm sorry. Person number 3 that did Kiddushin after 10, he was not invalidating person number 2's Kiddushin. He was just making a condition to marry her for 10 days. In that case, you would require a divorce from all 3 of them.
Just for 10 days? Who is he? Placeholder? I guess.
In other words, we really don't know what's going on. Is Rav's
for sure?
Is Rav's question that when a guy the scenario over here, we have a guy marries her after 30 days, and then another guy marries her in the beginning. Rav doesn't know what the story is. Is this a rejection of the first Kiddushin, or is it a condition? It's a Kiddushin for a limited amount of time. Is that question a meta question? It's always true about every person equally, or is it a local question? Anytime such an event happens, we don't know what to do. If it's a global question, so in the scenario of the 3 people, it's only a doubt for the first and the last, not the guy in the middle. If it's a withdrawal from previous Kiddushin, obviously only the last Kiddushin is valid. And if it's not a withdrawal, in other words, basically it is Kiddushin for a limited amount of time, then only the first Kiddushin is valid, and none of the other two are valid. If it's a global question, if it's a local question where each person can have different intentions, then obviously each person might have different intentions, and therefore you have to give divorce to each one. Okay, so that's we're second to bottom line of Testament 59b. Amar Abaye, time after Ra. The first guy comes along and says after 30 days. The second guy says from now after 20 days. And the third guy comes along now after 10 days. We're top of 60a. You need a divorce from the first and last. From the middle, and it's you don't require a divorce. In other words, Abaye says, let's examine the possibilities here. If we say that every Kiddushin after the first one is a limited time Kiddushin, the Kama Kiddushin, the Hanachlav Kiddushin. Only the first Kiddushin is valid, not the later Kiddushins. If we say that this question is resolved by saying that it invalidates previous Kiddushins, so in other words, the guy did the 20 days invalidates the 30 day, and the guy does the 10 day invalidates the 20 days, then what happens? The Basra Kiddushin, the Hanachlav Kiddushin, only the last Kiddushin is valid. So Abaye says it's a global question. Every scenario is going to be answered in exactly the same way. So Gemara says, Pshita, well, that seems to be obvious. No, it's not obvious. I would have thought, I would think that this question is really a local question. It goes to each person individually. And in other words, in that case, we really don't know. There could be 100 people lined up, each one choosing a different slot on the hourglass, right? So we don't know. So the Gemara says, no, Kamash Malon, that no, we could know, we do know, and it's a global question. Either they're all withdrawals, or they're all conditional and time limited, meaning that the first condition is the one that's valid. Ula disagrees, and he says the name of Rabbi Yechanan that no, there could be even 100 people, because it is a local question. Even 100 people, they don't have to give divorces. Rav Misharsha, the son of Rav Ami, says to Rav Asi, I'll explain to you the reason of Rabbi Yechanan. Shavu nafshik yisharga delivni. They've made themselves like bricklayers. So bricklayers, they all lay. Nobody lays bricks one on top of another. They always layer them, right? They move them along. So he leaves space for his friend, meaning the next brick, but in this case, for another Kiddushin to work. And by doing that, they sort of all allow some amount of Kiddushin to work, enough that it's one major doubt, and we don't know what to do with it. Rav Chanina had the following question: get ve'ena get. If a guy says, the guy gives a divorce today after I die, get ve'ena get. It's a suffix get. That's the opinion of the rabbis. Ve'emes, if he dies, she can do chalitza and not evil. And that makes Bishlem el Rav Messiah. According to Rav, this makes a lot of sense. According to Rav, the question is whether it is a t'nai or a chazara. In other words, we don't know whether this get is either valid or invalid. So it would make sense that you would require chalitza and not kiddushin. I'm sorry. You would not be able to do yibum. So either you're divorced and you wouldn't require yibum or chalitza at all, in which case the yibum would actually be prohibited, or you're not divorced, in which case you require yibum or chalitza, but you can't do yibum, so you have to do chalitza. According to Shmuel, this makes sense. This is the opinion of the Rabbanon, and he goes with Rebbe's opinion. The Shmuel Nami Hamani Rabbanon Vanodam Rebbe. Okay, El Rabbi Yechanan. There is a difficulty in Rabbi Yechanan. Okay, so let's explain this again. I failed to explain this a moment ago. I'll do it again. Okay, so there's we have two versions here in a side component of Rav. Okay, so the basic opinion of Rav, Abaye explains, Rav actually has a very consistent opinion. Either all the Kedushin work, or either the first Kiddushin works or the last Kiddushin works. Right? We don't know, but they're all in the same category. It is not the case that it's a local question. Each person could have different intentions. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the logic is completely different. According to Rabbi Yochanan says we could require 100 divorces. Why? Because it's like the bricklayers. Each guy leaves space for his friends. That means that according to Rabbi Yochanan, each person is is sort of leaving over a little bit of the Kiddushin. He's saying a certain part of you is not yet married. And that amount is sufficient enough to require a divorce. Right? Everybody leaves. In other words, if one person marries her after 100 days, 99, 98, right, etc. Each person, when he said, I'm marrying you after 73 days, what does that mean? That means that there's a portion here that's unmarried, that I'm leaving over, and that I'm allowing somebody else to take. And because of that, they all require divorces. It's a different argument than what Abaye suggested. Abaye suggested a possibility that maybe we don't know which one was a time-limited Kiddushin, which one was a withdrawal of all previous Keddushins. That's a completely different argument. That argument's rejected. Rabbi Yechanan's argument is that, look, there's a piece of Kiddushin available for each person. Right, like the bricks. Each one is not, they don't lay exactly one on top of another. There's a space in between. And because of that, the Kiddushin works. So now the question of Rabbi Yochanan is as follows. A divorce is not like that. Divorce does not work like that. You cannot leave anything behind in a divorce. Like we said, if you leave anything behind, like, for example, let's say you divorce a woman on condition that she doesn't eat apples. It's not a valid divorce. Why? Because the divorce is constantly hanging. Maybe yeah, maybe not. Right? Similarly, if you hand a woman a divorce with a leash on it, you throw the divorce and you're still holding the leash. Doesn't work. You have to leave go of it. You have to give her the divorce completely. If Rav Yochanan holds that every me'achshav ula achar lamed is leaving some space, then how could the divorce be valid? The guy says, I'm giving you a divorce now after I die. That means that some amount of you is not yet divorced. Well, if some amount is not yet divorced, then no amount of you is divorced. And then you should be eligible for yibum. You hear the question? Okay. We'll start the mission in just a moment. We're in 60A, right in the middle. Okay, perfect. You should be able to do yibum because the divorce is not valid at all. Rava says, get lahaitzi umitz lahaitzi. Masha shayar get gamrase misa. So Rava has this interesting argument. I'm not exactly sure what exactly the thought was, because Abaye's question seems to be pretty logical. I'll try to make sense of it. A divorce removes a woman from her husband, and death removes a woman from her husband. Masha shayar get gamrase misa. So because even though there's a hole in the get here, but the death of the husband sort of closes that hole. And in that sense, the divorce should be valid. Again, I'm not 100% sure why that should be the case. And Abaye points out a logical problem with that. Amarle Abaye, hold on, midami, there's no comparison. Get meitzia mirishus yavam. A divorce removes her from the property of the yavam. Right? If a yavam gives a divorce, then he can't do yibum anymore. However, misa mechansel rishus yavam. Misa, to the contrary, death of the husband actually brings her to yibum. So you can't really say that it's sort of the divorce here should invalidate her for that the death and divorce should sort of work together. There's no reason why they should work together in the context of yibum. To the contrary, death of the husband is not a divorcing factor. It's not a separating factor in the context of yibum. To the contrary, it's the creator of yibum. So actually, you can't say that this hole is plugged by a stopper when it's not a stopper. It's not a device that's meant to withhold her. To the contrary, it's the faucet. Right? Death of the husband is the vehicle that brings her to yibum. You're trying to say that get is a sink. It just has a hole in it. Sort of it constrains the water from going down. So the nisa, death of the husband, that's the stopper. It stops the sink from draining completely. So there's a hole, and you stop those. In that case, they're both functioning. The sink and the hole and the stopper are functioning to restrain the water. Over here, to the contrary, the death of the husband is not a stopper. It's the sink. It brings the water. It brings the relationship into existence. Yibum only happens with the death of the husband. So that they're not even comparable at all. Completely incomparable. So Abaye takes a very different tactic here. Al-Amr Abaye is completely different. Hasam time am I? What's the real reason? The real reason, the truth of the matter is, the divorce is not valid and she could do Yibum. But Zera Mishum Hayom Imesi. Until now, we spoke about Mahayom Ula'achar Misa. I'm giving you divorce today after I die, which is a problematic statement because you cannot give a divorce after you die. But the alternative to that, the more correct way to do it, is Mahayom Imesi, which is divorce today if I die. Meaning, if I die, the divorce happens retroactively. This is the type of divorce that soldiers in King David's army would give. If they didn't come back from battle, then they would be divorced immediately, retroactively from the time they gave the divorce. Okay, so now because the two divorces look similar, we don't want anyone doing Yibum. Okay, v'nigzer mehayom imesi d'tachlis atum mehayom alachar misa. Okay, if that's the case, then the general rule is if you actually gave a proper divorce, mehayom imesi, then you should require chalitza as well, because people might confuse it with the wrong text, which is mehayom alachar misa. In other words, it's as follows. The guy wrote the wrong text. We're concerned he might confuse it with the right text, and therefore we prohibit Yibum. Well, then why aren't we concerned that if somebody wrote the right text, he'll confuse it with the wrong text, and we should require chalitza? Because chalitza is an actual requirement if he wrote the wrong text, because he actually does fall to Yibum. You hear the question?
Yeah.
Okay, so Gemara says the response is very, very good. Lomdish response. Okay. The problem is that if you wrote the right text and you'll still require chalitza, people will think that actually you're still eligible for Yibum too. So they might end up doing Yibum. So the Gemara says, hold on a second. But if they'll do Yibum, then that concern is valid also in the scenario of Mayem Malachar Misa. Maybe they'll do Yibum. So the Gemara says, okay, well, in the case of the wrong text, what we say, we require chalitza. So what are we concerned about? Maybe they'll do Yibum. Fine. Right? Who cares if they do Yibum? Because there was no valid divorce. So if they do Yibum, in the worst case, nothing happens. There's no terrible. But the problem is, if the divorce is valid and they end up doing Yibum, that's a violation of prohibition. Very severe one. Marrying your brother's wife. So therefore, therefore Yibum either. Okay. Now we get to the next set of conditions. A little easier Gemara. But is not an easy paragraph, right? A guy says to a woman, I'm marrying you on condition that you give me 200 coins. The Kiddushin is valid, and he has to give her the 200 coins. Let's say he puts 30 days time limit on the condition. So if he gives it within 30 days, the Kiddushin is valid. If not, not. On condition that he has 200 coins, the Kiddushin is valid if he has the 200 coins. In other words, if he has whatever it is, $15,000 in the bank, then the Kiddushin is valid. On condition that I show you $15,000. The Kiddushin is valid. And he has to show her $15,000. If he points to the table, then the Kiddushin is not valid. What does that mean? It's not really the table. The shulchan here is a shorthand for shulchani. So he's a money changer. So he borrows money to break it up, basically. So the money isn't even his. So he's showing her money that he sort of works with, his business account, but it's not really his money. In that case, the Kiddushin is not valid. That's not called his.
What's that?
Yeah, over here we're talking about where he doesn't even have that amount of wealth. So it's not even his money. Yeah.
That's virtual.
Virtual.
Yeah,
Okay,
virtual.
it's okay. Now we go back to a Gemara we saw not long ago in Gittin. Or the end of Gittin. This debate that we had, a guy, we'll review this in a moment in the context of divorce, but in the case of Kiddushin, he marries her on condition that he will give her 200 zuz. And what happens? Does he have to give her the 200 zuz for the Kiddushin to work? Or do we say that no, they're married, and at some point he has to give her the 200 zuz? When is that point? Maybe never, right? Maybe he'll die and retroactively they'll never have been married.
Oh.
Because he can always give her the 200 zuz, they're actually married immediately. Okay. Rav Huna says, one second. Rav Huna says he has to give it. He has to give her the money at some point. Whenever, at any point, he can always fulfill the condition. Rav Yehudah says when he gives the money, when he gives the money, that's when the Kiddushin is validated. Hashlami Allah have a Kiddushin, but until then the Kiddushin is not valid. My benai, what's the difference of opinions? If she accepts Kiddushin from somebody else before he makes the payment, the Rav Huna, according to Rav Huna, Allah have a Kiddushin, the Kiddushin is not valid. If Yehudah have a Kiddushin, according to Rav Yehudah, the Kiddushin is valid. We have a similar scenario with regard to divorce. He divorces his wife, a condition that she makes a payment of 15 grand to him. The divorce is valid, and she has to give the money. When does she have to give the money? At some point. Rav Yehudah Amar, second. Whenever she gets around to it, she gives the money. Rav Yehudah Amar, Rav Yehudah says when she gives the money. Basically, it's a condition she can fulfill it at any point in time. Rabbi Yehudah Amar Kisha when she gives the money, when he hands her, when she hands him the money, that's Gara Haget. Let's say the divorce is ripped up, and then she makes the payment. According to Rabbi Yehudah, the divorce is not valid. Why not? Because the get is not extant; it's not around anymore. A shavat or was lost. Rav Huna have a get. According to Rav Huna, it is a get because the get happened immediately. The payment just has to happen at some point in time. Rav Yehudah have a get. According to Rav Yehudah, it is not a valid divorce. Okay, why do they need to repeat themselves both by Kiddushin and by gittin? This, by the way, is a repeat of the Gemara and gittin that we saw as well. It's necessary. If the debate would have just been around Kiddushin, then I would think that Rav Huna's opinion that he has to make the payment at some point in time is unique to Kiddushin. Because she wants the Kiddushin. They're sort of romantically involved. So presumably she has the patience to wait forever for the money. However, but divorce where he's pushing her away, maybe he agrees to Rav Yehudah that he demands the payment for the divorce to be valid. And therefore, he should have to make the payment in order. So therefore, it had to state that he disagrees, that Rav Huna disagrees by Kiddushin and by gittin. The itner bahach kamar Rav Huna mission to iu like kosef lemisba. Avalacha the iksif lemisba ema moedel Rav Yehudah tzricha. Okay. Rav Yehudah says with regard to Rav Yehudah says with regard to divorce, Rav Yehudah says she must make the payment in order for the divorce to be valid. Why is that? Because he is not embarrassed. He is pushing her away to getting divorced. He's not embarrassed to collect the money from his ex. However, when they're becoming married, right, when they're getting married, so now she might be embarrassed to ask him for the money, right? They're romantically involved, like, it's like signing a prenup. It's a romance killer, right? So she doesn't want to ask the money for the payments. Maybe he would agree. 1 second, hold on. I'm sorry. The opposite. That would be in Rav Huna's statement. In Rav Huna, that says that she has an endless amount of time to make the payments. 1 second. That's because the reason why he has an endless amount of time to make it is because he will demand it. However, when they're romantically involved, she won't demand the payment. And maybe the Kiddushin would not be valid until he actually makes the payment to her, lest the payment never happened because she's too embarrassed to ask for it. So therefore, maybe the original. Therefore, it's necessary for us to repeat that Rav Huna disagrees in both scenarios, the scenario of Kiddushin and the scenario of gittin. Okay. Should I repeat that? Why Rav Huna would have to be stated in both scenarios? Go through it again briefly.
Yeah.
Rav Huna says that he and she have an endless amount of time to make the payments.
Okay.
And Rav Huna needed to disagree both by Kiddushin and by Gerushin. Why? Because if he would have just made a statement by Gerushin, by divorce, I would think that because by divorce they're separating, so therefore she has an endless amount of time to make the payments. But in a case where they're getting close together, maybe she doesn't mean to agree to the Kiddushin until the payment is actually made. 1 second, I'll take it back. Stop. 1 second. Hold on a second. Sorry, contrary. If Rav Huna would have just said divorce, then I would think that the reason why divorce has an endless amount of time is because the husband is comfortable demanding the payments. Kiddushin, where the woman is not comfortable demanding the payment, maybe he'd agree to Rav Yehudah that the payment would have to be made before the Kiddushin is validated. If it would have just said Kiddushin and not get, then I would think that Kiddushin you have an endless amount of time because they're sort of close together. So she relies on him to make the payments. But divorce, where they're separating, so maybe he demands the payment before they actually separate. And therefore, maybe he'd agree to Rav Yehudah's opinion that first she'd have to make the payment before the divorce is validated. Kamashmal, then no. Okay. Meisvei. The Gemara asks a question. Here's divorce on condition that you pay me 200 coins. The Brisa says that basically if the divorce is ripped up before the payment is made or it's lost, the get is still valid. But she can't get married until she makes the payment. Which is clearly not like the opinion of Rav Yehudah. According to Rav Yehudah's opinion, first you need to make the payment, then the divorce is valid. If the divorce got ripped up before the payment was made, the divorce is no longer valid. And additionally, we learned in the Brisa, Amrullah, he says to her, this is a divorce on condition that you pay me 200 zuz, 15 grand. Umeis, and he dies. Nosna, if she made the payment, then Ein Skukul Yavam, she's not eligible for Yibam. Lo Nosna Skukul Yavam. If she didn't make the payment, then she's eligible for Yibam. Same scenario, right? He says, pay me 15 grand. And he dies. And if she's made the payment, okay, well, then she's divorced and she's not eligible for Yibam. If she didn't make the payment, she is eligible for Yibam. Shimon Gamliel says you can give it to a relative. She can make the payment to a relative. What's the debate here? The debate here basically is, are my inheritors in place of myself? Can you satisfy the condition of making a payment of 15 grand to the husband by giving it to his inheritors?
She'd rather just keep the money and have Khalitsa perform?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
You can see there's plenty of chuvas about secular men that did not want to have chalitza performed on them, including for very, very large sums of money. As a matter of fact, there's a woman who gave an enormous amount of money to yeshivas in the 1920s during the Great Depression. And she was involved in such a situation. I think she offered an insane amount of money at the time, and her secular brother would refuse to chalitza.
Give her.
She died.
Reader.
And she was older when her husband died. I think she's probably in her 60s or 70s, but she was never able to remarry. I'm not sure she was considering it anyway, because she never had chalitza. Anyway, they call her the mother of the yeshivas. She gave fortunes of money. She was very, very wealthy. Okay. Okay. Everyone agrees, though. The debate here is whether an inheritor stands in place of the husband, but everybody agrees that it's a condition, meaning you don't to Rabbi Yehudah. It's clear that it's not like Rabbi Yehudah. The divorce is valid and conditionally that you make the payment. Amar Rabbi Yehudah Hamani Rebbe. The Amar of Huna Rebbe called Amar Almanas Amar Me'ash Shadami. Upli Rabban Allah Another Amar Mikrab. So he says this is different. Rebbe here said Rebbe is of the opinion that every time a person uses the word almanas, saying normally speaking, a divorce on condition. If a guy says specifically divorce right now on the condition that you give me the money, then Rabbi Yehudah agrees to Rav Huna, divorce right now and give me the money at some later time. And Rav Yehudah is of the opinion that according to Rebbe, all these scenarios are in that category, and therefore he agrees to Rav Huna that in these scenarios that the divorce is valid, but you have to make the payments. Okay, this discussion will continue tomorrow. Okay, have a great day.